Johannesburg's water infrastructure is said to be aging and is not sufficiently maintained, leading to water loss. Some residents have been without water for weeks now. Johannesburg Water says reservoirs are constrained and high water consumption is also crippling the system. Could this be the first signs of a system collapse? Let's discuss this and other issues now with Professor Mike Muller from Wits University of School Governance, and is also part of the Water Institute of Southern Africa. He's a water scientist and expert himself on the engineering side. Prof, good afternoon. Welcome to today, and thank you very much for coming to our studios this afternoon.
Pleasure.
Yeah, water is becoming a big issue. I mean, a few years ago, you and I would be speaking about water. It was like that's something that's down the line, but it's here with us, all kinds of problems. From your perspective, what is the biggest issue around our water?
Okay, and you know, I think you're correct to say we've been talking about it for quite a while, because we were waving the flag, a bit like in the electricity story, and saying if we don't take action now, there's not going to be enough water in a few years' time. Well, a few years has come, and now we are beginning to find that when the weather's hot and when people start watering gardens and using swimming pools and, you know, doing those kind of things, there doesn't seem to be enough to go around. So let's forget about the past. We know that Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 is being built. It will be ready in 5 years' time, in 2028. Until that time, even if the population of Gauteng grows, the amount of water available is going to stay the same. So each person is going to have less water available than they used to have. That's where we're beginning to feel ourselves now.
Yeah, I know you feel very passionate about what is our role as water users. Before we talk about that, I just want to talk about our infrastructure. Would you say that generally South Africa has a good water infrastructure?
You know, we have an excellent water infrastructure at the level of the rivers and dams. It is working well. We store the water, we manage it, we bring it into the cities or to close to the cities. That side of it is working well. In Gauteng, even the water board, the one that takes the water from the river and treats it and brings it into the cities, has been working reasonably well, give or take a few problems of load shedding. Once you get into the cities, I don't know if you've noticed the city managers, the city management, it seems to change every day. You never know who to pick up the phone to. And you cannot run a big city's water infrastructure if you have interruptions in management, changes in priorities. And I think that's what's been happening. We really have suffered from poor management in our cities.
And there's been an unstable kind of management set up as well, which might have been worsened even recently with the coalition governments that are not really doing well. What about us investing in water infrastructure currently? Because there is old infrastructure we hear, but we also have to upgrade the current infrastructure. There's a resident who told one of my colleagues, Bafadile Morane, this morning in one part of Johannesburg, to say where they live in that ward, they know that the water pipes that were built for a certain capacity years ago, they have not been made bigger.
Well, you see, that's the problem. You can have a water pipe underground for 100 years and it'll still be working if you've looked after it, if you laid it right, if you bought the right material and it's been maintained. But if your city gets more and more people, and for instance in South Joburg, Lynmeyer, where they've been without water for I believe up to 5 weeks in places in South Joburg. Now there's an area which we know the population has densified. Has the infrastructure been increased? Probably not. So we have to make sure the infrastructure keeps up with the people, but then we also have to make sure that that infrastructure works well and is properly maintained. Those are the two sides. Maintain and manage properly, and where necessary, expand. And expansion isn't the primary challenge, I don't think.
So the current challenge, what would be primary?
Well, you know, the good news, now let me be a bit controversial. The good news is that in Gauteng we waste a lot of water. Now, why is that good news? Because it means we've got a lot of savings that we can make without too much hard work. What happened in Cape Town when they had day zero is they had actually managed quite well. But then when they hit a drought, there was no fat to cut.
Where's the West Station in Johannesburg? In Gauteng, you said there's good news is that we waste a lot of water. Where is that happening?
It happens at the household level. People use too much. Quite a few people don't get billed very well. And if you don't get billed for your water, you don't care how much water you use. You know, you think about it, but you don't necessarily change.
So some people are being underbilled, so to speak?
Some people aren't being billed. Some people are being underbilled. Some people are just not paying and no one does anything about it. So people on the one hand. They ask not to use too much water and wash their cars and their driveways with hose pipes. They take no notice of it. They irrigate their gardens at midday. Those kind of people are contributing to the problem, and we can reduce that water consumption. But that's not, the other side of that is the people who run the municipalities. Because you and I know that if we drive down the road, if we don't see a water leak, it's actually an unusual occurrence. We see water running down the road quite frequently. We see breaks that are repaired, and then the next day they repair it again because they've broken again. So we've got to cut the fat on both sides. Users have got to be a bit more disciplined, and municipalities have got to work better. And actually, if they work together, we will get through the next 5 years with using less water per person, but not noticing the difference in our homes.
So as a citizen, as a resident of Gauteng, when you see driving around or walking around, you see a leaking pipe, you should report it, and the municipality or Joburg Water, whoever is responsible, should be able to quickly come and stop that water from leaking. That will conserve more water for us.
And in the old days, and I'm talking about post-96 actually, because that's when I started looking, if you phoned up Joburg Water and said, I see a leak in such and such a place, and they'd ask you what corner it was, you could check on your watch, because their target was 8 hours, that they would get there within 8 hours and fix it. And I would reckon about 80% of the time they used to do that. Now you report the leak, and if you're lucky, within 7 or 8 days, perhaps they'll have arrived.
Is it a lack of will? Is it a lack of managerial experience, management? I mean, what leads to that kind of behavior? Post-96, the behavior was different. Post-2023?
Yeah, I think there have been lots of problems in management because of the changes in the city government. But in Johannesburg in particular, we have this strange situation where Johannesburg Water has an independent board of directors, and they run the technical side of the business, but the money and the billing is done by the city of Johannesburg. Now, so you have two different groups of the organization, and they need to cooperate with each other, and that has added to Joburg's problems.
Yeah. So when we in the media speak about sometimes there's issues of ineffective governance, is that what we could be referring to?
You know, I look at an organization. Does the person in charge know the business? Does the person in charge appoint the right people? Is the person in charge allowed to appoint the right people, or are they told over the coffee table, you better put this person there because he's my friend? If that kind of thing happens, then you weaken the whole organization, and it goes all the way down to the plumber and the laborer on the ground.
Yeah. Now, the users, you've mentioned the behavior. You know, we are watering our gardens when we really shouldn't be, because the water is a scarce resource, and we know all of that, and there's a lot of wastage. When we hear the appeal from Joburg Water to use water sparingly, just to be practical for a short while, what does that look like?
Yeah. Look, it does mean check what you're doing in terms of your gardens, if you're lucky enough to have a garden, in terms of how long you shower for. But really...
And we love our cars. We tend to wash them too much.
Those cars. They've got to be clean. I mean, there's a lot of dust in the air at the moment. And then there'll be mud when it rains. But I think one of the things which we don't do is look at our water bill every month. How many people looked at the water bill? How much water did they use? And did they think the average South African household is entitled to 6,000 litres a month free? How much do we use? Do we use 12,000 or 18,000? They don't know. And quite often it's hard to find that information on the bill. And I think where the municipality needs to talk to the users is to do things like saying, do you know you're using twice as much as your neighbour? And by the way, that's what they did in Cape Town. They started shaming people by saying, you're using more than your neighbours. What's your reason for this? And after a while, after a few months, if people didn't change, they actually used to come and visit and maybe actually encourage them to use less, even restrict them. But if we first start by telling people, this is what you're doing, you know, I believe people listen and respond.
Should we brace ourselves for that scenario you've just pictured in Cape Town, which can be general, and we could term it water shedding, like we have load shedding on the power side, where the amount that's flowing through to your property, if you are over consuming water, is reduced deliberately and intentionally?
The trouble with water is that if you try and restrict water to an area, the people at the bottom of the hill are perfectly happy because they get the water. The people at the top of the hill don't have water for days and they complain. So you can't do it in the same way that load shedding, you switch it on and you switch it off. And I think that's the challenge. That's why you have to get people to think about what they're doing and check that monthly bill. How much have we used? And say, we could have used less than that.
So we have a bigger responsibility, therefore, as users. We shouldn't just be pointing a finger at the water boards, at the municipality. Yes, we should hold them accountable for not delivering and maintaining and repairing on time and making sure that the infrastructure is well looked after and they can invest in it as well.
And you see, I think that what we should expect of our municipalities is, please tell us, what are we doing? How are we doing compared to other people? Does our suburb use more than others? You know, in our township, we've got these people who don't seem to be metered. How much gets used in that area? That kind of information will help communities and households to help the municipalities, and we don't need to run out of water. We don't need a day zero, but we will have this kind of problem cropping up unless we all start working a bit more closely together.
Yeah, you know this better than I do, but we're told we're a water scarce country. South Africa is pretty much dry. We think we're not, but we feature among one of the driest regions in the world. Now we are in the middle or the start of El Nino weather impact. We're told by meteorologists is going to be drier and hotter, and climate change as well, the effects of it. Now, if we don't get some of these things right, we would get more negative impact from these natural phenomena than currently we're experiencing.
Yeah. You know, this is my technical background. I look at all this uncertainty and I say, we manage for uncertainty. And so we're looking at what might happen in the next 5 years. And that's why when the Vaal Dam was very full and people said, why are people asking us to use less water? We said, because in 3 years' time, if there's an El Nino drought, you'll be really pleased we haven't used all that water up. And I think people find it very difficult to understand that in water, you're always looking 3, 4, 5 years down the line, because our dams can supply the water for 5 years, but only if we use them right. And that's why Minister Mkunu puts a restriction on how much water Rand Water is allowed to take from the river, even when the dams are full. They still are put under a restriction. Question now is, how do they share that water between the different cities, the different towns, the different industries? That's another area we need to talk about. Why does Tshwane and a part of Ekurhuleni run out of water and Mogale City has a lot? You know, well, please explain to us. And we don't hear that kind of discussion.
And that will be at the municipal level. That explanation should come from the water board or from the municipal?
It should come from both of them, because they work together. Rand Water pumps to different municipalities. It's a black box. We don't know how they decide where to go. But we know that sometimes this reservoir has water and sometimes the other has. They must tell us why. Yeah. And I think they'll find if they tell people more, people will actually cooperate better.
Yeah, Prof, before I let you go, I need to ask you this, because you know better than I do. Is Rand Water still safe to drink from the tap?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, one of the nice things about living in Joburg is we have really good water. And the only time when you have to be cautious, if there's been a break in the pipe in your neighborhood, pipes empty and they have to be filled, they get rinsed out and drained. People complain about all the water going down the street. Quite often it's because they're draining out the dirty water. But once it's refilled and it's been properly disinfected, we've got great water. We must enjoy it.
Thank you very much. That's Professor Mike Muller from Wits University School of Governance. He's also part of the Water Institute of Southern Africa, just sharing with us some insights and information about how we can do better. It's not just up to the metro, not just up to the water board, it's also up to you and me as users, as consumers of water, to really help to conserve the water. We are a water scarce country.